So real brief, I'll try to do a real brief version of this. Ninja Turtles was invented by two young men in 1983. They were two aspiring comic book artists down in and around the area of Dover, New Hampshire, in the northeastern United States. A young man named Kevin Eastman and a young man named Peter Laird. They actually found each other in a very weird way. One of them, Kevin, was riding a bus from Amherst to Northampton and found a little magazine on the floor, picked it up, loved the stuff that was in it, went and found an office where this guy worked, and they're like, yeah, well, you like this crazy stuff this Peter Laird draws, so why don't you guys hang out? And then, you know, all this stuff happens. He actually finds him. Peter needs a roommate. Kevin moves in. They're laying around watching really bad television, A-Team, T.J. Hooker, all that really awesome stuff in the late 70s, early 80s. And Kevin draws a picture of a turtle with nunchucks on its arms, like Bruce Lee, and hands it to Peter and says, this is a Ninja Turtle. And then Peter goes, oh, that's cool. Well, why don't we add Teenage Mutant to the name? Drew 3 more as a group, handed it back, and that was it. They laughed about it. They thought it was hilarious. So they actually decided the next day, you know, this is really silly, and it's ridiculous, and they loved Frank Miller, and they loved Daredevil, and they loved ninjas and Bruce Lee, and the stuff that was really hot at the time. So they decided, you know what, let's make a little comic book, a 40-page comic book. They scraped together some money from a tax return, borrowed some money from an uncle, and they printed 3,000 copies of a black and white 40-page comic book that was the wrong size in 1984, and it was a little bit too big, so it didn't fit into comic book bins. So it went on desks and tables in front of the cash register, and they sold out immediately. And then they did a second run, and then they did a third run, and in that time they just realized, well, if we do a second book, we could actually both clear $2,000 every 2 months and pay our rent and make comic books. And crazily enough, if anybody remembers the Ninja Turtles, the famous bad villain of the Turtles is this guy named the Shredder, who was actually inspired by a cheese grater put on one of their forearms while doing dishes. They actually killed him in the first book because they thought, we're only doing one, so we'll just do one. And it's basically a ripoff of these comic books they liked. Anyway, so long story short, they, within 3 years, are making their own black and white comic books. A marketing guy finds them, and all of a sudden they've sold a deal to Playmates Toys and Fred Wolf Films to make a cartoon and toy line for millions of dollars in like literally 3 years.